Hello. Well, today
Hello.
I'm with Dr. Susan Barnes again. And some of you will remember on YouTube, we interviewed each other in August last year, 2024. Time is flying. So welcome,
Oh, it
Sue.
does. Yeah.
Yes. Now,
It-
Sue is a certificate holder of the Spiritualist National Union, teacher of mediumship, a physical medium yourself, spirit artist, and a YouTuber. Lots of educational YouTube videos on spiritualism and other stuff. And with the Zamits down in Australia as well, you've got quite a lot of large body of work on YouTube at this point in time.
yes. Yeah.
And you're also an author. So last time we featured Sue's book on physical mediumship, and today we'll be looking at Sue's book, Visual Spirituality. Welcome, Sue.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
So what is the book about then, Sue?
Well, what I wanted to do was I wanted to do a book, and it's an academic book. And I wanted to demonstrate that the history of art is basically wrong. That the history of art took out all of the spiritual aspects of the artists. And this doesn't just apply to spiritualism, it's across the board. So, and tried to turn art into a commodity, into an object, and they took out all the kind of passion in the work. So I was documenting the fact that all of these artists, especially artists in the abstract expressionist movement, I mean, before then as well, were all working with spiritual concepts and spiritual ideas. And so I was trying to put that back into the art history. So I had to first argue why
Yeah.
and how it was taken out, which I did, and then I had to start putting it back in.
Oh, lovely. And what did you find then? What was the source of inspiration?
Well, it goes back. It goes back a long way. I mean, it goes back like the whole Hudson River School with all of those beautiful, beautiful landscape paintings. They were all spiritualists. And the Canadians that did the landscape work in Canada, they were inspired by spiritualists. Um, and not only that, but the Bauhaus was originally half spiritualist, half
Hmm?
very practical, but the whole spiritual part of it was taken out of it. For example, the Bauhaus movement came to the United States, and most art education, I think even to this day in the US, uses a lot of the Bauhaus ideas, but none of them are spiritual.
Right.
None of them are spiritual. So I had to try to put it all back um, in many different ways. And then, of course, I had to do a whole chapter on spiritualism itself and
Yep.
spiritualism in art, which is a whole topic of discussion we can talk about because that's a whole very interesting history. And my friend Anbridge Davies, she's been arguing for years that spiritualism in art should be considered, especially the portrait, should be considered a part of religious art,
Right.
and it's not,
No. But
but it is.
religious art is possibly inspired by spirit as well, isn't it? Because you've got all the halos around saints and angels, etc. And maybe that's because people actually saw the lights around a sainted person.
I don't know whether they actually saw the auras around the people or not, which is very possible. And I mean, of course, I also study a lot of the work of Edgar Cayce. And so Cayce says that you can get from between a person's physical body and the spiritual essences, you can get visualizations of things like halos and lights.
Yeah. Well,
So,
I
yeah.
saw a green light around a healer once, and it wouldn't be maybe stretching the imagination if you'd seen that, because it was all around his head.
Hmm.
If you'd seen that, then maybe you could draw the sainted person with the halo to represent what you'd seen. I think I'm I think that's quite logical.
Yeah, but the other, connotation was that most of those images are coming from the Bible.
Right.
Most of them are coming from a Christian perspective. So what's happening in spiritualism is something that's very, very different. In spiritualism, it's trying to prove the continuity of life. And the other problem was that um, spirit portraits, actually started about the same time or right after the Fox sisters' invention. I mean, it
Right.
came very quickly. And there was a publication in the United States that I don't know how many years it lasted, that was a whole gallery of spirit art magazine. Now, a lot of the artists that were in the magazine, nobody saved. They didn't save or record them. But the other problem with the spirit art is that when it's evidential art, it's very much for that person.
Yes. And
It's
the
the
reading that it goes with it.
right. Now, Wella and Pet Anderson, who are two people that really haven't been researched enough, who were spirit artists, their work was popularized all around the United States when they
Oh.
were, yeah.
What was their names again?
Wella, Wella, and I think it's Piet, Pete Anderson.
Oh, right there.
I'm trying to remember, it's Ersonoen, but it's Anderson. And they were a couple, and their work was very, very different because they would magnetize their pencils
Oh.
and they would then create the images. Now, if I turn on the slideshow, I do have some of their images in the slideshow. So yeah, visual spirituality, and we see why. Okay, here's how I started. While it was ignored, I mean, it was ignored for philosophical, social, historical, and technological reasons. And so during the 20th century, spiritual and religious beliefs were not widely acknowledged in any of the art because the art was considered to be secular. And art was a representation of the material world, not the spiritual world. So when we look at this, we see that from originally the cave paintings and all of that had a
Yeah.
religious or mystical connotation. So artists have been dealing with this for a long time. So when we talk about spiritualist art, the religion of spiritualism, as I said, influenced the Luminist movement, and this is a Luminist painting.
Yeah. Nice.
Um, and it's because of the light. That's what luminism is all about.
Right. Oh, yeah.
Thomas Cole and the whole Hudson River school also very much influenced by spiritualism. And this comes from the fact that they believed that nature was a reflection of God. Here's a little more of the Hudson River School, Niagara
Oh,
Falls,
beautiful. Yeah.
popular theme. Um, Again, this was them going out west to the Sierra Nevadas again. And then women. The interesting thing about the Hudson River School is there were a lot of women that were working with them. A lot of them were family members of the male artists, but there was a whole female school of women who did these as well. Here's another one. Evangelina Mount, who did this picture of the daisies, was related to another artist, Sidney Mount, who actually did a lot of spiritualist drawings. Here's his work. But he also did, and I don't have a picture of it here, he also did a trance painting, I think it was of Leonardo, but he did a couple of trance paintings as well. And they also were studying mediumship. Now this is really interesting about Ryder's work. Ryder actually believed in psychometry and that his pictures got vibrations in them. And so it gets into a little bit of materialization here. And he would work on the pictures for a long time. Now here is a couple I was telling you. Well,
Yeah.
Wella and
No, no,
Pat
no. Yeah.
Anderson.
So,
It's SON. They were working in the 1860s and 1870s, and they would magnetize their pencils and they would do these drawings. And a lot of these drawings were they did them like of Atlantean figures and different types of people, but they also did portraits. And their portraits and images were hung in a lot of living rooms around the United States, and they traveled a lot around the United States. I know, and our country's pretty big,
Yeah.
so if you can imagine, a lot of these spiritualists would actually go East Coast, West Coast, they would go all over the place.
Well,
But here's the one we wanted to get to with when it gets to abstract art is Georgina Houghton. Because Georgina Houghton was a true spiritualist, but she was a woman doing these very abstract pictures that were done with a planchette drawings, and no one had ever seen anything like it before. But the male art critics kind of panned the work, so she never got to be well known within England.
oh,
Yeah,
I can
but
see where you're coming from there. If it's a planchette, could
yeah,
easily be 100% spirit people moving the planchette, couldn't it?
exactly, exactly. So she would do seances, and she taught a lot of other people and other artists to do this type of work. But again, it was never really recognized by the art establishment, and she was totally eliminated from art history. It's only been in the past 20 years that her work has really come back into acknowledgement, and shows have been done of her work. And the most of her collection, I believe, is in Australia. I met the person who coordinated the shows of her. There was a show in London and there was a show in Australia. But she's just becoming well known now. But some of the other artists that were associated with her, I mean, again, the art establishment didn't recognize it. But then there were established male artists that would come to her seances and her salons where they would do and show the art. So she did influence other people as well. Now, this is moving up a little bit further along the line, but the other person who very much should have influenced abstract art is Hilma af Klint. And Hilma af Klint, I think the first time her work was really shown was in 1987. There was a huge show that was in Los Angeles, and I was fortunate to have seen it, called The Spiritual in Art. And it was the first time that a major gallery acknowledged the fact that a lot of this art was done with spiritual intent.
Yeah.
And they had a whole range of artists that were in the show, and her work was in it. A couple of years ago, the which museum? A museum in New York City did a whole show of her work. And what happened was that she knew her work was ahead of her own time,
Yeah.
but so she didn't sell it. So she held on to it, and her family held on to it. And so her work there's a whole body and collection work that's intact of
Well,
her things, where a lot of Georgina Houghton's work, I think, has been lost. But Hilma af Klint has not. There's a whole fund to take care of it. The interesting thing about Hilma af Klint is she was trained as an artist, and she did traditional types of work as well. And they were very detailed, like flowers and plants and different things. But when she did the spirit art, there were flaws in the spirit art that you wouldn't find when she did her traditional artwork,
no.
which shows that spirit was working through her.
Yeah.
So
But even
she,
something like that picture there, even if you said it's not spirit, it's the higher mind of the person or the unconscious part of the brain, it's still not the conscious. She's not thinking about it, is she?
no, and I think that's another point with the abstract art is people come to me and say, "Oh, abstract art, that doesn't mean anything. That's just a bunch of splops." That's what my father called it, splops. Um, but what they were trying to do is they were trying to represent the abstract world. So they were trying to show the vibrations and show the different parts of the abstract world, which is what it was all about. And Hilma Klimt was very much inspired by vibrations and different things that were going on in the world at the time she was living. Oh, here's her big ones. She did these huge paintings. These are much taller than I am. And these were for, she was trying to do a temple type of thing. Now, the pyramid piece there, if you stand in front of that pyramid, which I've done, you can feel the vibrations coming off of that image.
Wow.
You get a sense of it. That's, yeah, she stressed that she was a tool for her guides and that her hand was led by them. So she was very much working with guides.
Yeah.
But going back a step, back to our spirit art, we see that spirit art took a major transition with the work of the Bang sisters and the Campbell brothers. Now, this was taking spirit portraits and evidence to a different level. And the importance of the spirit portraits, as I said, they started at the very beginning of spiritualism. People were doing spirit portraits as a form of evidence. The Bang sisters did it to the point where they didn't even touch the canvas. They were doing physical mediumship and materializing images on canvases of loved ones. And the way they would do that, and this is the story, and I know they did this in the auditorium in Lilydale. Group of people would come in, they'd give everybody a ticket. They would pull a number from the ticket, the person would come up. The Bang sisters would be on stage. They would stand on either side of the canvas, and you could see ectoplasma kind of forming around the canvas. And then gradually the image, like a Polaroid picture, would become clear. So the image would slowly materialize on the canvas. The last thing to happen when the picture was done is the eyes of the person would open.
Oh.
So the eyes were closed until it
Yeah.
was done. Eyes would open. And the person who had the ticket would recognize a deceased loved one. And of course, in those days, a lot of children died. So they had a lot of portraits, of children and different loved ones. There's a story, I have to tell this story. Ron Nagy tells this great story about this woman. There was a woman whose husband died, and she didn't have a portrait of him. She didn't have a picture of him. And she wanted to set up a library in his name, and she wanted a portrait of the gentleman. So she went to the Bank sisters. So she went up to Lilydale, went to the Bank sisters, and had a portrait of her husband made.
Wow.
Now, this portrait was found many, many years later, and Ron was able to find the driver that drove the woman to Lilydale to have the portrait done to verify that this was actually a Bank sisters portrait. Because we found, like in restaurants and weird places, they found Bang sisters paintings.
Heavens.
Yeah. Now, the thing about the paintings is that they look just as fresh and just as clear and just as sharp as the day they were made. But we know that it was physical phenomena because the images would change. I know Osborne Moore did a whole study of the Bang sisters, and he had a portrait done of his guide, and they did the portrait, and it was in profile, and he looked at the portrait and he said, oh, she's always in the other direction. So by the time he got the picture home, it had changed to the other direction.
Wow.
So things have been eliminated from the pictures over the years, and things have been added to the pictures over the years.
Stunning. I won't
Yeah.
offend you by saying what Wikipedia says about the Bang sisters. Straight away, it says something like frauds, forged, you name it. But you can't trust Wikipedia on anything spiritualism or ancient history. because
No, but
there's people certainly in America who rewrite Wikipedia. Even if you went along and did a really academic article on spirit artists, somebody would come in from this group and rewrite it to include forged, fraud, and all kinds of things like that.
yeah, well, there was a detective from Chicago who did go to the Bang sisters' home to check for fraud. He looked for trapdoors, he looked for all this stuff. He couldn't find any.
No.
He couldn't find any. So yeah, so there is. I mean, you can't trust anything in Wikipedia.
In
Uh,
this on spiritualism, psychic,
no.
or
Mm-mm.
I follow a lot of Britain's hidden history, and you can't trust Wikipedia on anything in of Britain's history in that period because
Even
there are people rewriting it. It's as simple
yeah,
as that.
even Gordon Higginson was accused of fraud.
I think everybody who's anybody will have been accused.
Absolutely, absolutely. There's no question about it. Um, but they were, and I know that the Campbell's brothers. I don't know if I have them next. Yeah, the Campbell's brothers. They did find some. They were accused of fraud too, which is why some people in England won't consider their pictures. Um, but Azor, this is their spirit guide here in the robes. I have to tell you that on the back of this painting are signatures of all of the people that saw it materialized.
Well,
Yeah, and they're still there.
yeah.
They're
But that
still
one
there.
on the guide there is very similar to James Tissot's painting of his wife, who materialized in a physical seance. And
Wow.
the artist, well, I know it was James Tissot is the artist. It was his wife who died, and he painted her and the guide, and that looks very similar to the sort of guide. And they had their own light, holding his hand in front of him like that. The light came out of their hands.
Yeah.
And he couldn't take a photograph, but he was an artist, so that's what he did.
Yes. So anyway, this is a really, and his eyes follow you and around the room. It's
Really?
kind of eerie, but this is it's a huge painting, and it was materialized in Lilydale in their cottage. Um, Now the picture of Lincoln here, what is interesting because I'm going to say it, iridology, when they do the study of the eyes,
Yeah,
find the illnesses.
yeah,
They actually did the study of the eyes of the Bang sisters, oh, no, sorry, of the Campbell brothers painting,
yeah.
and they found all of Lincoln's illnesses in the eyes of the painting.
Good heavens.
Yeah.
You would think that would be impossible, wouldn't you?
Yes, the eyes of these images are so incredibly, um, what should I say, mesmerizing is the word. I mean,
Yeah,
there's something just
lifelike.
mesmerizing about them. And so that's, and as I said, they open up last in the painting. So there is something to the eyes as well that's very, very important. But you could never do this kind of painting. There are no brush strokes. There's no marks on it. I mean, they look kind of like pastels,
Yeah,
um, but and pastels of that period of time, but there's no sign of it being a pastel. You know, I found this one picture I thought might have been a Bang Sisters picture in a antique shop in the area of Lilydale, but we were able to just determine it wasn't because we Ron told me the tricks on how to tell whether it's real or not.
right.
But yeah,
To
it's
include brush strokes, no doubt the lack of them.
well, it was charcoal, and then what happened was because the Bang sisters actually used to go out to the woods in Lilydale. I don't know if you know, we have something called a stump,
Right.
and it's
I
out in
don't
the
know.
middle of the woods. It's
Yeah,
there's a canopy of trees, and
yeah.
it's an old tree stump, and the mediums used to stand on the tree stump and give messages.
Wow.
Today we can't stand on it, but we still give messages there. The Bang sisters used to go out to the stump and do drawings, do charcoal drawings for people.
Well,
And there's a couple of them in the Lilydale Museum, but their charcoal drawings were very different from the drawing that I saw, so then I knew that it wasn't the
right.
same thing. But anyway, yeah. So then we get into more modern times, and you get into more modern times, and you get into Kandinsky, and now Kandinsky was considered to be the first one to do the abstract art, but really it was Georgina Houghton
Yeah.
who was doing it. And this picture, again, talk about spiritualism. This one, he's trying to make the unseen world visible,
Yeah.
and of course wrote the book concerning the spiritual and art. He was into theosophy and thought forms,
Yeah.
and the figure in the middle here is supposed to be Madame Blavatsky.
All right. I think she was
And
a
he,
bigger woman than that.
well, yeah, it's a woman. She's got an hourglass shape, so we know it's a sense of it as a woman. So yeah, and then there's a figure in the sky that's kind of flying there like a spirit. So yeah, this is a very well-known piece that's got a lot of spiritual significance. And Paul Klee, um, his work was very psychic and emotive, and he was working in a very mystical way as well.
Yeah.
And I have to say that I have a friend who's a medium, whose her husband, who's now deceased, was related to Paul Klee.
Oh,
Yeah, so she actually got some private tours of his work, which is incredible. But he was incredibly spiritual. So was Frank Kupka. His work, again, we're working with telepathic vibrations. So some of them were working with directly spiritual ideas, and this was the Canadian group of 7. Again, Tom Thompson, Lauren Harris. They were working again with spiritualist ideas, and Lauren Harris then went and became part of the Transcendental Painting Group, which was in the southwest of America. So there is a relationship again of all these different arts movements, but again, they are not normally part of art history. It's only recent that they're doing tons. Oh, and then we get into the whole psychology in art, which I have to talk about. Jean Defay, he collected art from mediums, psychiatric hospitals, patients, and children. And some of the people that he did were Adolphe Wolfe, Madge Gill, who was a medium, Austin Lesage, who was a medium, and Laurie Pigeon, who was a medium. So all of these people that were associated with the psychiatric hospitals, a lot of them were mediums. And again, they were trying to get to a pure form of art, an art that was not corrupt by any type of organization or school or organization. They wanted they didn't want the social stress or strain on art. They wanted it to be pure, so they went to the psychiatric patients.
oh,
So there is a whole
details,
big
isn't it?
relationship between art and mental ailments. And this art eventually became known as outsider art, as a form of creative expression that exists outside of the cultural norms. And trance mediums fall into this category. And there were ones, and I believe this one particular artist would work like from the bottom up in a painting. He had been a miner. There was a painter that would have been a miner, and then he started painting, and he would like you going underneath the earth, he would start from the bottom and work all the way up and get these incredibly complex images.
Never seen anything as detailed as that, except for one really autistic person. And he did a sort of picture of a cityscape, and the detail in it was mind-blowing, as is that one.
Oh yeah, no, they get incredibly detailed.
And that one again, look at that.
Yeah, this one is another one. So they do, and here's Madge Gill. I mean, look at Madge Gill. She is the work and the detail in it was she was controlled by an entity or a spirit called Minorist, my interest.
Yeah.
um, And she would work on rolls and rolls of paper and do these very long,
Oh,
elaborate types of pictures. And I mean,
yeah.
look at all the faces in them.
Yeah, I mean, you can't get any more faces in that one on the left. And the one on the
No,
right looks as if the pen never stopped.
oh, I
It,
know.
continuous movement to make all that uh, background, the colouring everywhere. It's just phenomenal, isn't it?
And she was a medium, yeah. uh, Austin Lesage, yeah, he began to read books on spiritualism and attend seances. A lot of these people attended seances as well. And his work, I believe, had a lot of Egyptian kind of themes to it.
Yeah.
And again, they heard voices, but the voices were spirit voices, not voices that were in their heads. Here's another one that worked with spirit voices that would guide his hands to create the drawings. Lori Pigeon. These are automatic drawings that she did.
She just let the pen be moved in her hand above the paper.
Yeah, and the images at first look chaotic and then they form into shapes of figures
There's still a
and
few
figures.
people doing that. I know a couple.
Yeah, I do it in spirit art classes a lot. I find that the automatic drawing um, is very helpful because what it does is that, and this is why the abstract artists were interested in it, because it releases the right side of the brain, the
Right.
part of the brain that connects with the spirit world by doing the automatic drawings. And you can do automatic drawings, and if people aren't thinking, they'll get images and symbols in the drawings, and you can then interpret them and give them readings from these drawings, and they're usually very helpful.
So what exactly do you mean by automatic drawing? Same as automatic writing, but it's drawing instead of writing. So
Exactly.
what exactly is that then for the people who don't actually know?
Okay, well, here are my scribbles. Well, I'll have to hold up later. But I do scribbles. I get them to do scribbles and then fill in the scribbles and do different things. So without thinking, it's automatic is without thinking. It's not, you can try to let your hand to get to be controlled, but I mean, even if you're just not thinking and allowing your hand to just let the movement go and do and kind of be what it's going to be.
You put a
Uh,
pencil or a pen or anything else,
right, exactly, and let it
and
go.
maybe in your left hand if you're right-handed or vice versa,
Exactly,
and you put
exactly,
that above a sheet of paper, maybe on a pad, and you just let it go when you're watching the TV or doing something else
exactly.
at the same time. And the
And
ones who
that,
do writing get words, sometimes without punctuation, and the ones who do drawing get images like Laura Pigeon's.
yeah.
Nice.
And then, of course, there is a certain amount of dissociation involved in it. Now, this picture is a piece of trans art by Jose Medrado. I don't know if you've seen his work.
I was going to come to him at some point. He's the Brazilian guy, isn't he?
He's the Brazilian trance medium that he does. I don't know when he's coming to England next, but he has been to England doing different trance pictures. And I mean, his work. And I've seen these trance mediums where they'll be painting with their hands and painting with their feet too.
Yeah.
And they're painting in the style of different deceased artists. This seems to be something that's done in Brazil. I don't
Yeah.
know why, it's just Brazil.
Slightly different outlook, spiritism versus spiritualism.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Maybe
There-
that's part of it. This guy, Jose Medrado, does he do it in the dark? Because some of them do it in pitch black, don't they?
no, he does it in
He
the
does it in
light.
light. Everybody's watching what he's doing.
He did this picture in 16 minutes.
Well, and it's oils. A lot of it is oils. It
It's
doesn't
oil. Yeah,
shouldn't dry
it's
or,
oil.
shouldn't mix the way it does.
Well, that's why we know spirits involved because they literally plop down all these colors on a page, take their hands and go like this, and it's flowers.
Yeah.
It's an image,
And
and
he doesn't take any money for it either, does he? They sell the paintings for charity.
Yes,
But
that's
he's
right.
not selling them for himself.
No, but see, that's the whole difference between the Spiritist tradition
Yeah,
and spiritualist tradition. Because in the Spiritist tradition, you're not supposed to charge money.
no.
Um, I went to this Gordon Higginson Foundation did a physical mediumship week in I'm trying to remember where it was in England, on the coast in
Up in
England.
Scarborough, was it maybe?
No, 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 it was
Or
Robin
down
Hoskins
south?
Hotel. That Robin, the one hotel that Robin used to run, where the ISF and everybody used to go. And so they were there, and I found out Jose was going to be there, and I got all excited because I wanted a piece of his art, and I was like thinking, oh, how am I going to get a piece of his art? You know, I know that usually they do one piece that's not so great, so I figured I'll bid on the piece that's not so great, or bid on this and bid on that. And then I said to myself, oh, if he does a portrait, I'll say it's my grandmother. And then I said, no, 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 you can't do that. That's
Oh,
totally unethical.
yeah, you could have.
So I scrapped that from my mind. So
Oh,
I go
dear.
through the whole demonstration. This was the last painting he did. He does this painting. Then I found out he had done a face. Then he rubs out the face and he puts this face in. He
Yeah.
holds, and it did look like my grandmother.
Wow.
I mean, he does the pictures, and most of them are landscapes. And there are very few portraits,
Yeah.
you know. And this was done in the style of Monet, and you
Beautiful.
know, so
Beautiful.
and people, you know, people could see a slight family resemblance between me and the picture. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well,
And
look at
then,
those flowers around and the dress. It's just beautiful, isn't it?
well, you know, I said, this is how I would picture her in heaven,
Yeah.
you know. And then the problem is, I really don't have a good picture of her. I don't think I have a picture of at the age that it was drawn. Most of the pictures I have of her are much older, so I don't really have a good one from that. But she had the long red hair and green eyes. This is him doing the paintings. You know, you see they put all the colors and everything all around him,
Yeah.
and
That's such a
yeah.
variety to choose from there. Cool.
Oh yeah, no, they put lots and lots and lots of colors around him, and he goes into the altered state and does it. But and then of course David Duguid was the other artist that did the trance art,
Right.
and he said he was working with a Dutch painter born in 1636. So some of these people really, there's a whole tradition where they do believe that they're working with deceased artists, the
Yeah.
spirit of
Yeah.
deceased artists. Now, I guess where evidence could come in at this point, if you're being real evidential, is the fact that I do have to say that I do see some resemblances between the artwork these mediums do and the artwork the artists actually did when they were living.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I can see some similarities in the colors and things.
Yeah.
So
A lot of it is the personal testimonies of people. Because do you remember the film about Van Gogh where the man who cut his ear off? And I think Anthony Quinn played the part of the painter. Do you remember that?
I know the movie, yes.
Well, Anthony Quinn was on TV on in a documentary or whatever, and he was talking about making that film, and he said that he sat there doing the painting in the style of Van Gogh, and he heard voices in his ear saying, "Not like that, like this." So he believed that Van Gogh was right by him, and that's an actor saying that story, somebody whose reputation is on the line. So why would he make it up? But he categorically said he believed Vincent van Gogh was inspiring him, in the actual making of the movie.
I've heard that about other actors that have done movies about people who've passed, that they feel the spirits of the people do actually come and work with them.
Uh,
Yeah, I've
Why
heard
wouldn't
that.
you? Makes sense,
Yeah.
doesn't
It makes a lot of sense. I mean, if you're open to it, I mean, and if you can kind of, if you're got your psychic antennas up and can be open to it, then absolutely you should be able to do that. So we see here's another artist that was a medium. And again, that was Medrado. And I also got into Art Brut was what was the name for the outsider art, but a lot of the psychologists studied mediums. Jung, we can flip through this. William James studied a lot of mediums here in the United States. Mrs. Piper was one of the people that he studied. His art, now his writings influenced the art of surrealism and the future of psychology. And of course, then there's Flournoy, who's the book From India to Planet Mars, was all about the medium who believed, she was an artist who believed she was getting inspiration from people from the planet Mars and actually came up with a Martian language.
Good heavens.
Yeah. Helene Smith, that's her Martian language there, her Martian landscape.
Looks a bit like Sanskrit, doesn't it? An
Yeah,
old version of Sanskrit.
yeah, it does look like an old version of Sanskrit. And then Jung, believe it or not, started his career studying mediums.
Was he the gentleman who talked about synchronicity, or was that the other one? Freud.
I believe it's yes, it's Jung.
Young,
Jung.
because that's quite an important thing for spirit contact, isn't it? Coincidences that become synchronicity when there's meaning behind the coincidence.
Well, we do when we're doing the spirit art, we get a lot of coincidence synchronicity. We have people that draw the same symbol in 2 or 3 images, and they're working independently on Zoom in
Yeah.
different locations. So they're not looking at what anybody's doing, and they'll come up with very similar pictures and very similar images. And so it's amazing. But Jung himself was an artist.
Well, I didn't realize that.
Well, Jung's Red Book has amazing, amazing artwork in it. And people don't realize it that when he was studying in Paris, he was actually doing paintings. I have a book here of Jung's art. He's
Well,
doing landscapes. Yeah.
it looks like the chakra system, that doesn't it? Above
Yeah,
whatever's above the mountains.
a lot of it, and he did mandalas, and so a lot of his art is very spiritual, very, very spiritually oriented in the Red Book. So,
Yeah.
again, see, there's another piece from the Red Book. Mythical,
Yeah,
mythical.
that's your boat in
Okay.
Egyptian mythology, isn't it? The
Yeah,
boat
no,
that takes
a lot
you
of it has.
to heaven. Yeah. Well,
Now,
that's a wonderful presentation, Sue.
so that's kind of an overview of all of the art. I mean, I have a
Yeah.
different presentation that's just about the spirit art because I think what was interesting about the spirit art, the spirit portraits. Originally, there's a whole line of them from Coral Polish on down that came from England. So that was going on in England. Of course, now it's all over the place. Um, and then the precipitated art was being done here in the United States, and the trance art comes from Brazil. So I don't know why there's kind of these different geographic areas. The only thing I can say about the precipitated art is that one of the theories is that a lot of the physical mediumship occurred around the Great Lakes area where Lilydale is
A lot of water.
because
Yeah.
of the water and the electricity around the water.
What do you exactly mean then by precipitated art?
Precipitated art is art that appears on a canvas that hasn't been touched by hands.
Physical phenomena. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's pure physical phenomena.
I suppose that's akin to the photography as well, where they put images on plates without exposing them, that kind of thing.
Yes, it would be similar. Would
And
be
does Jose Medrado doesn't do exactly that then? He does more of a controlled form of art in a trance-like state, trance state.
Yes, he does more of a control form of art, except it happens A, very quickly,
Yeah,
B, the colors don't go muddy, which they should.
yeah, they should blend, shouldn't they?
They should, with all the colors he puts down, it should turn to mud, but it doesn't. They stay very vivid, very bright, and he does get a feeling or a sense of the actual artist that he's channeling. I like the word channel, trancing at the time.
Yeah. Does he go deeply unconscious or overshadowed?
I believe he's deeply unconscious.
Right.
Now, there's another woman, Maria Gertrudes, that also does it, and she came to Lilydale a few years back, and she was definitely deep in trance.
Right. I know they did an article on Jose in Psychic News some months ago. I'm not sure. I might have given my copy away. But it was fascinating reading. And as you say, the speed that he completes a massive oil painting is just phenomenal. So with portraiture art, then we're talking about like the painting right behind you.
Yeah.
You now I've had a go at this, but my drawings are pathetic. And I give a drawing of a man with a bald head to a guy who turned up at Margaret's house, friend of his. He's a fabulous psychic. He's given us great psychic messages about events of a future that do actually take place. So as a psychic, he's stunning. But anyway, I did him this little drawing, and he said he had no reaction. I'm thinking, well, give me some reaction. I know it's a hopeless drawing, but I said, do you want it then? He said, why would I want that? I've got the photo here. And he pulled out of his pocket the photograph of the man I'd drawn. Exactly, I'd drawn that photograph, basically. But the thing was, that was his boyfriend. The thing was, he was still alive. The man I'd drawn was alive and well. That was his boyfriend, alive and well. But why did I draw a man who was alive then?
Because if he's a psychic, you are in the psychic vibration.
That's a good answer. 10 out of 10 for that one. So the normal spirit portraits, though, are of people who are on the other side, aren't they? They're deceased from the earth plane. They're normally spirit people, aren't they? Is that
Normally, I
normal?
mean, occasionally I can get someone who will do a picture of somebody that's living. I mean, it doesn't happen really very often.
No.
Uh, but again, that's because they're in more of a psychic vibration.
Yeah.
But
It's usually the message that goes with it, though, that identifies the person, isn't it?
yeah, and sometimes it's um, a a piece or something. Sometimes it's something you do in the drawing, and the drawings don't have to be real detailed, but it could be a characteristic in the drawing of the person that lets people know who it is, um, and it's fun. I have another friend, Nancy Smith, who is also a spirit artist, and I did in Lilydale last summer. The two of us did
Yeah,
drawings together, which were a lot of fun. So I want to
I
do that
bet.
again.
Yeah.
I don't do it enough,
No.
I mean,
Well,
and
I
I'm
think
always surprised that, you know, when I do it, people recognize the images.
well, I think Coral Polge used to have a medium working with her to give the messages. Not 100% sure, but I know Margaret worked with Coral Polge once, and Margaret did the mediumship message wise. And so, the medium is talking often, and the artist is drawing away, sometimes out of sight. What they tend to do is put it on acetate and
Right.
on an
Yeah.
overhead
Well,
projector. But Margaret is talking, and then the picture then verifies who you're talking about.
yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, some people work that way. Um, the reason why, well, Coral Ryder was the one that got me to do the messages with the drawings because she said that if you're gonna like get a CSNU or do something with the SNU, you can't just be the artist.
No, you got to do the two.
You
Yeah,
have to do both.
yeah.
So, I mean, I did, when I was working with Nancy Smith, I was being a medium. We were both actually, but I was being a medium, she was being the artist, but then we both shifted off a little bit with the work,
So
which
with
was
your
good.
spirit art, do you find, well, are you trained as an artist as well by any chance?
Yes.
So do you find you, because you're an artist, you get a really good likeness with all the shading and no, it doesn't matter. Because I know some of the people on the SNUI in particular, the Spiritualist National Union International arm,
Yeah, I know.
the Dutch, there's a couple out in Holland. They're wonderful artists. Kathy Tsukalist, another really stunning artist. And it helps if you can draw a fabulous portrait anyway, compared to my kind of drawing. There was a competition in Psychic News once for your spirit art. Some people were sending in their spirit art and they'd highlight the submissions and they'd put them up. So I thought, well, I'll enter a picture. You're going to laugh at this. So I'd seen an angel when I worked in a Christian spiritualist church, the Trinity in Tredegar in South Wales. And the amazing thing, this angel just walked down the aisle of this traditional type of Christian church, that's spiritualist church as well. And it was just the light was just coming from everywhere. So I thought, I'm gonna paint that and submit it to Psychic News. And here it is.
Oh, nice.
You like
Very nice.
that? So,
Yes, I do
so
like
this
that.
is the rostrum that you're standing in front
Right.
of the lectern. They always have a Bible on it. So I'm giving a message to this lady down here. And then this 8 or 9 foot tall being of light. Light was coming out of everywhere. And when he turned his face to me, well, I was just blown away. So I gave the message to the woman, and it turns out that because the angel said to me, "Oh, she's seen angels." So I asked her, and she said, "Yeah, I went into the healing sanctuary in Arthur Findlay College. There was 3 patients on 3 chairs, with a healer standing behind each one, and behind the healer was this 8 or 9 foot tall angel, wings, feathers are 18 inches long, beautiful." I didn't believe I'd seen an angel. I come across as the most skeptical person, but I'm a truth seeker. I didn't believe I'd seen an angel. I believed I'd had it put into my mind what this woman believed she'd seen. So we were running classes. Margaret finished the class, which definitely took place on a Monday. And on the Wednesday morning, I had a phone call. So the class finished on the Monday, and Margaret said, "You'll meet a new guide." And there was an empty chair in front of me. And after meeting a new guide, in that empty chair was another angel sat there, 8 or 9 feet tall from his bum to his head, wings, big wings. He was all black, no light whatsoever coming out of him. When he turned his face to me, looked me in the eye, he's above me, looked down at me, I quaked in my boots. It was awesome. Well, what is an angel in the Bible is apparently is a messenger, and the one who's black is the messenger of an impending crossing over. And the phone call I received on the Wednesday morning was from my cousin in Rotherham to say that my Auntie Olwyn had crossed over Tuesday night.
Wow.
Yeah, so he did exactly what it said on the tin. He was a messenger of an impending crossing over. I then believed I'd seen an angel. But all of that came about by the American woman, Joan Wester Anderson. I picked up one of her books in a town in England, and it was Walking with Angels or something like that. And her family had had their paths crossed with what she believed was an angelic being. And so she, being a journalist, she gathered other people's stories about encounters with angels and made books out of them. And once I'd read that book, it was about 6 months later, I saw that being. I think what it does is open your mind, doesn't it? It expands your consciousness to the idea that it's possible. And of course, an
Well,
8 or 9 foot angel features a lot in her books, as do a lot of spirit people by the look of the stories. Going back to the abstract forms of arts. Now, you've met Colin Hall. I've got one of his pictures on the wall. His pictures are very abstract. They often have faces, the animals, they have colors. He works with a variety of painting mediums, doesn't he? Pastels and acrylics and all kinds of things. But they all come with a message for the person as well, don't they? So what's your take on that kind of art? Is it
That's usually called psychic. That's a more psychic art. Um, the autographs are generally more of a psychic type of artwork than mediumistic type of art. They only become mediumistic, and they can become mediumistic when the artist starts to put in faces of
yeah,
deceased relatives. And I mean,
they're
that's happened to
recognizable?
me
Yeah,
where I've started to put in faces, and the people I was sitting with started recognizing all the faces of
right.
people drawing. So technically, that's when it becomes mediumistic, but generally, the autographs are more psychic. I mean, that's one of the questions when we talk about, are we doing psychic work, are we doing spirit work? Is that we look for evidence in different ways, and the evidence isn't always just an exact likeness of the person, but it's being able to give healing information to that individual by relating to memories, by relating to incidents in their lives, and being able to provide them with helpful information now in their life.
Yeah,
You
so
know,
that goes back to the reading that goes along with the portrait, doesn't it?
yeah.
I can remember being off work when SNUI was without camera. It was just sound only.
I remember those days.
Or am I wrong about this? Because I got the picture. So whether they could put the picture up as opposed to camera, I don't know. I'm not sure. But anyway, one continental lady, and I forget who it was. I think it might have been Eva, drew a beautiful picture of a very stylish young woman with a flick over hairstyle and a tiny cat, a small pet cat head. And I was off work and lying around, and Margaret put it on because I was lying around. So I have a lot of asthma, and I was off work with asthma. So I joined in the SNUI meeting, and I accepted the drawing. I couldn't really understand much of what was said, but we were talking about somebody who was turned out to be a step grandmother of mine. But it was the cat that clinched it because every time we visited her, she had the row of terraced houses that like appeared in one of your paintings earlier on the presentation. And the back of her house was above a fire station, big flat roof with a couple of lights in, windows like greenhouses, if you like. I don't know what you call them in America. I don't know what you call them in Britain. Skylights, I think they are. And in the one skylight, when we used to visit me and my brother when we were quite young, there was a mummified kitten in the skylight. And I think she'd drawn that, because it's obviously a kitten because of the size of it. It was tiny. The cat she drew was alive, but we used to see this mummy. Yeah, but that stuck in my mind. So the woman I was accepting as my step grandmother, and I don't know, I'm not sure whatever came from with it. She might have been talking about collieries, which are mines. They're also known as pits, aren't they? A pit, coal pit. Well, her surname was Pitt. So I got a feeling that I was on the right lines by accepting it. So I dug out photographs then of Nellie Pitt, and I only found literally one or two. There were a couple when, as an old lady, when she was, quite aged, and that picture of the young woman didn't look like that. But there was one picture when they were in a pleasure park, like down the beach, that kind of park. And she was walking with my granddad, and there was two other people with them. And I put that onto the computer, and again I flicked it, and then I was astounded to see that the drawing and the picture, to my mind, matched with the quiff of the hair. It was the hair.
Mhm.
So I thought that was really good evidence.
That is good evidence.
So a lot of indigenous art, do you think, came out of drug taking, or is it psychic, or is it just their best attempts to put down on a rock face what they're seeing?
I think you have to be careful if you're doing any kind of drug-induced things. I mean, I will not do any kind of spirit work or spirit
Under
art
any kind of influence? No.
if I
Um,
even had a drink of alcohol.
yeah. But a lot
Um,
of indigenous people obviously did, didn't they, with every kind of drug
well,
going?
I think when you get into like shamanism and all of
Yeah,
that, and the indigenous people that want to try to have altered types of experiences, the problem with it is that if you're doing those types of things, what is the quality of the level
yeah,
of that you're reaching? And I think this is something too. I mean, I'm hearing people now talking about doing soul to soul type of mediumship, and the question there is with the evidence, and the question there is if you're going to do soul to soul mediumship, you have to be developing your soul. And I know Ed from the Edgar Casey work, and I just had this conversation with someone about it. His view was that pure psychic work is your soul communicating with the God consciousness. That is the ultimate on psychic work. Now, there's all kinds of steps and levels in between. I mean, I don't deal with people that are earthbound spirits. There are some people that do because I want to stay high on a higher level than that. So part of it is what are you going to be attracting? Tradition that's got a lot of ritual to it, and you're following a lot of ritual and you're working in those guidelines, maybe what the art you're going to get would be different.
yeah. Have you seen the work of Inigo Swan?
Yes.
What do you make of that then? Because that's just beautiful art, as if it was just art, isn't it? He's a
Well,
powerful psychic, wasn't he? He was very
Ingo, I have to talk about Ingo. He, I mean, he was part of all the remote viewing experiments with the government in the United States. Ingo Swann did this beautiful, beautiful picture of Edgar Casey.
right.
It's my favorite picture at the Casey
Yeah,
Center
yeah.
of, and it was all kind of Casey's past lives
Oh,
in this image, and it's a really wonderful, wonderful piece. I'm not familiar with that much of his work, um, but I do know he did some really fantastic pieces.
yeah. I don't think when we talk about remote viewing, art comes into it. It's just people trying to draw what the put words into a drawing, aren't they? They know what they're seeing, but they
Well,
they just draw it.
it's interesting, the remote. I just had a conversation with another medium friend of mine because I can't do remote viewing,
Right,
and I now understand why, because she was explaining to me that when you do remote viewing, it's on a certain level,
right.
and it's not the level I want to
You
work
want to
on.
be on, yeah.
Um,
I know Margaret did it once where she was trying to trace a missing person, and she said she drew out a picture of a street plan, and she said, "You go to the cafe on that corner and show them the picture of the missing person, and then they'll direct you down the side street and up a flight of stairs, knock on the door on the Wednesday, and she won't be there. But you go back on the Friday and you'll find her." And they said, "Oh, we think we know where she is. So should I go there?" Well, and Margaret said, "Oh, yes, you must. Take your map with you." The person was in Bombay. So Margaret sent somebody out to Bombay on the strength of the drawing. But lo and behold, he went into the cafe. He had a good idea by then where it was. Showed the picture, went there on the Wednesday. That was the Wednesday he showed the picture. She wasn't there. Went back on the Friday, and there she was. So, but it's not really art, is it? It's just putting down a representation
um,
of words.
no, it's not. It's Not really art. I mean, it usually there's a targeted location or a targeted site that people are trying to remote view or get information about. I mean, psychic detective work is more of what Margaret was doing there. I mean, where you're trying to get a psychic image about the person to try to find them. Again, that work is difficult work. It's hard for mediums to do that because you expose yourself to all of the negative things that people do to each other,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
you can be exposed to that. And I've actually knew a medium once that had to change her name and move and change the location because she was doing that kind of work and people came after her.
Well, she was so
Yeah.
accurate. Yeah. Well, I
Yeah.
think we've covered just about everything, Sue. So we
Even the remote viewing.
even the remote viewing. So we've talked about your book, Visual Spirituality, and a lot of your spirit work is now on YouTube, isn't it? Do you have a particular name to the YouTube channel?
No, I don't have a particular channel of where it is. I mean, but you can find it at the Victor Zamet site.
On Victor's Summit site. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Uh,
And you can see some of my talks on Howard Sharp and some of the other spirit artists that,
and the one we did it ourselves last year.
yeah,
Well, thank you very much for your time and all that
my
information,
pleasure.
wonderful information, and the presentation and some of those pictures you've found absolutely stunning.
Well, they're all inspired by spirit.
Thank you again, Sue.
Thank you very much. Bye bye.
I'll just knock it off now.